I'm gonna call the regular meeting of the BZA to order, and if we could stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. If we could have a roll call. Daniel, please.
Jenny Sevigny,
Yes.
Mike Donlin,
Yes.
Judy Schulte,
Yes.
Chris Jennessy,
Here.
Tina Mazzarelli.
Everyone is present. First on the agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes from August 10th. I had a couple of corrections. I handed those to Danielle. The one thing I would suggest as we go forward, just sort of some standard language that, you know, if we're going to deny a request, I proposed the language. It was found that this request did not meet the conditions needed to establish a practical difficulty in complying with the ordinance. Because it doesn't meet the ordinance, that's why they want the variance.
Right.
So, and what we're doing is looking to see if the conditions that would be needed to establish a practical difficulty which would warrant a variance exist. And that's,
Say that again. How would you phrase that? Aha. It was found that this request did not meet the conditions needed to establish a practical difficulty in complying with the ordinance. Okay.
because that's what they need to establish there's a practical difficulty.
Now, can I say one thing too? This is the last board before you go to circuit court. So the minutes should reflect the reason for a denial, if there is one. Well, I mean, there has to be one or it wouldn't be denied. But those things have, because like 5 years from now, if someone decided to sue the township, the only reference we would have to that would be to go back to the minutes. If we went back to the minutes and it just said it was denied, we wouldn't know why. So from a legal standpoint, we need to spell that out.
What are you looking at, Jenny? That is the wording, where did you?
One of the handbooks, you know, I'll bring it in. It's
Is it
from,
this one?
it's one of those. I don't recognize that cover, but it's a zoning board manual that the state puts out.
So do you think that we need to revise the minutes to
Well,
Judy's comments and your comments before we approve them?
Let me ask this. So we have the 5 guidelines, right?
Yeah.
And so the meeting minutes should reflect that the applicant, you know, was reviewed considering the 5 guidelines. I think that's enough. We have this document. Do you give this out when they?
Oh, it's with the application.
Yeah, so it's with the application, you know. So we say, we reviewed the 5 guidelines as it relates to the property, and then say, we found that the conditions did not meet, you know, the conditions needed to establish a practical difficulty weren't met. Along those lines.
I mean, is this something you guys have to say in the motion, or is this something I'm making up as I'm
Going along, right?
Going along on the minutes?
Yeah, you know, we have,
A standard.
yeah, we have a cheat sheet that we use at the planning commission for certain types of motions, so that we make sure we get the language correct. And so what I recommend we do is we just have a standard,
Mhm.
you know, language for approving or denying, so that when we make the motion, we're consistent with it.
And I know when we approve it, we're supposed to say we approve it
Because,
because it lists which one of those.
Yeah.
right,
fits.
right, yeah.
That makes sense. I mean, just having that standard language so that we can insert the different things that are.
Well, I'll work with you on that,
Okay,
and then we'll follow whatever tonight, but we'll come up with something. It'll be just a cheat sheet we give to the board members.
So do we want to hold off and table the approval of the minutes to the meeting? Okay.
Oh, no, I don't think so. If you guys are okay with the way I've amended it,
Yeah.
then we just approve as amended.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we approve it amended.
I will second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting minutes as amended are approved. All right. Next is the approval of this evening's agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Agenda for this evening is approved. I believe we had a public notice of this to those residents that are affected within a 300 foot, is that 300 foot? Any communications from any of the neighbors? Okay. Any other notices or communications we need to be aware of? All right, so then,
I'll make a motion. We open the public hearing for.
okay. Public hearing?
Yep.
So,
That's what we were
I'll
told.
second it.
Okay. We'll just do a roll call vote. Or we don't need a roll call vote, I'm sorry. Just all in favor of going to the public hearing? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we are in a public hearing. So what that means by going into a public hearing is that we will close it when we're done discussing this, and then we'll take an action on, the discussion that happened. So the time to have the public discussion and back and forth will be during the public hearing portion. All right, so I know I spoke with Mr. and Mrs. Collins this afternoon. They're very helpful in showing me the property, and I understand everyone else has had a chance to be out there and take a look at it. Is there, and so we can discuss it, but is there anything you would like to add to what you've told us already?
I can summarize, because I'm sure everyone was slightly different. It was great, we had 100% attendance.
And no boots.
Yeah, and it's tiring, I hadn't talked to that many people since I retired, in one day. It's just, we'd like to build a barn with, I got stuff outside, tractor and tractor implements, and I like to keep things neat and tidy. And, we didn't build the house, but when we saw it a year and a half ago, when we bought it, retired out here, we thought it was good, great. We've always liked the area, but need a little more space undercover to want to make some wood projects in the garage. I want to store the tractor and the other stuff out in the back a little bit. So.
And so describe to us what you see are the difficulties in using the existing property and meeting the 40-foot setback to the back line of your property.
Sure. Just starting out, whoever laid out the subdivision 20 years ago worked really hard to get every lot buildable site and then a bunch of unbuildable property to use up all the property that was developed there. And our house clearly has one flat spot. As you guys know, you come in at 60 feet wide, very narrow. There's one flat spot, and then it drops off into a swamp, that I share with the DNR, and then back up a very steep hill. I've had several contractors in with a brush clearing machine that cut me a path so I can walk around. And they've said, oh, it's too steep a hill. The all-wheel drive track machines can't make it up and down, and maybe I should wait till winter, then they can cut them in the winter when the ground's frozen because of the swamp. So it's just 2/3 of the property is not accessible for traffic or for building on. It's woods, hills, and swamps.
And so the placement of the 20 by 25 proposed barn, in your request, it appears that you're looking for it to be roughly 15 feet.
15.7.
Yeah, 15.7 feet from the property line, which would be almost 25-foot variance. from the 40 down to
Yeah,
15.
on the DNR property. It doesn't say there, but I measured it today. It's 45 feet from the nearest residential property line
On the side.
on the side.
Jenny, isn't this an REF, rural estate farm?
Yes.
So the rear is 50.
Yeah,
not 40.
I'm sorry, 50. Thank you. So we're 35 feet roughly.
but at least there's nobody's house there.
And so describe the difficulty in placing it 50 feet from the property line in that location.
In that location, it would actually be, I'd have to knock down part of the house. Because it's so close in there. The house is, 67 feet from the back property line. So get 50 away, it only leave me 17 feet, and then having the two buildings separate, pretty skinny.
So you currently have 40 feet to the, I don't know how to call your, I know you want to enter what looks to be the north side of
Yes.
that building. So
Mhm.
the northeast corner
Yep.
appears to be 40 feet from a current structure you have there, sort of a
Yes.
shed,
Mhm.
existing shed. Then you go another 20, that's 60, and then another 15. So you're roughly, the back of that shed is going to be roughly 75 feet from the property line.
That makes sense.
Okay.
Which way is going?
I'm looking at this distance. What he has here from the back of the shed to the property
Oh,
line
gotcha.
adjacent with the DNR, why that has to be that 15 feet off the property line and it can't move closer, let's say, to the back of that existing shed. That's what I'm
Yeah,
trying to understand, why I know there's a small hill there.
yeah, just the slope and the existing trees.
Yeah, and but of those existing trees, it appears that I think there were 4 and 3 are scheduled to be taken down.
Yes,
So taking down those trees, it looked as if you had room to, even if it maybe isn't 50 feet, you can increase your distance beyond the 15 feet.
I could slide it 5 feet north and I could slide it 5 or 6 feet. That would be east, yes.
Yes.
I want to pose a question in this conversation. It might kind of throw it off a little bit. In this property with the irregular shape of the property and stuff, I am, how should I say this? I'm kind of wondering what constitutes a side yard property line and
Yeah.
what constitutes a rear yard property line. The reason why I asked that question is the bulk of the property is shaped, to the rear, what could be perceived to the rear, which is the large southern, or is that the southern portion of it?
Yes,
And being that it's such an odd shape, I couldn't find anything in the ordinance that talked about odd shaped lots like that. And the reason why I'm bringing that up is there is, if you look at the side yard setbacks, you have a combination of 80 feet for distance. And when you already have 61 feet on one side of the house, if you moved the barn over, slid it over to the east another 4 feet, you would have a total of 80 feet if that property line was considered a side yard. I was confused
The
with
property
that.
line adjacent to the DNR.
Right here,
Would be
yes,
side.
because the odd shape of the property line, and I was trying to find something in the ordinance, Jenny, that was talked about odd shaped lots and how to consider what is side yard and what is rear yard and what, well, we all know what front yard is. I mean, that's all along the street, but that was the only point that I was confused about. And I don't have a good knowledge of the zoning rules to put my finger on it, so I mean, you probably do.
No, but I think we have.
Do you?
I
Do we?
think we have some, because, but what I'm thinking of, and you might remember, where we get into when we have a side yard and a front yard. And so there was some discussion, because sometimes, if you're on a corner lot, what's front, what's side, if you get
Right,
two roads adjacent to your property.
Usually
Correct.
that's behind, because it has to be behind both ways, the corner and the front.
Yeah, so, but I thought there
Behind-
was some,
Yes.
the house.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But it-
so the house orientation comes into play, right?
Yes.
yeah, but, and so, but I was wondering if in that section, there was a discussion about an odd shape, how to determine front and back. I hadn't thought of that.
That was, when I was looking at it, I was looking at it from that standpoint, because when I see the property line, I think, I'm just gonna go out and say, it. I think there are, if you took the barn and put it to the back behind the septic field, I think there's some room that you could do that too. You already have the 2-track going down through there and things like that. And I think you could avoid, you get the 50 feet from the DNR property line. You know what I'm saying? And still not impede your septic field, still do all that stuff. But
Be hard to get the tractor in the snow.
you'd have to plow it all the way, and I do it all the time too with my barn. But the reason why I asked the side yard thing is I first thought it was a side yard. I'm going, wait a minute, I started reviewing it, and then it's the 80 feet total of for side yards. And you're talking about sliding it over 4 feet. You could get the 80 feet and still be located. You wouldn't need a variance for the barn. You just need this board to determine whether that's a side yard property line or a rear yard property line. And just throwing that out there.
But for side yards, I guess clarification for me, side yards, is it has to be a total of 80, or is it 40 on either side?
It's a total of 80, so he can have, correct me if I'm wrong, Jenny, 60 on one side. He's got 61 on one
So
side.
you can have.
So he
60
could
on
have
one side and
19.
20 on the other.
Yeah, he could have 19 on the other. So just throwing,
And if you look at the orientation of the house, I can see where that question is very relevant.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know that. I think it has to do the orientation of the house on the property. And this one actually,
But then with that house at an angle like that, which one's the rear, which one's the side?
mhm.
that was the question.
I mean, because if that's the case, that almost looks like that it would be a side because it's to the side of the house.
And one can argue, perceive that, with the bulk of the property and the shape of the property, it curves around, that it could be perceived as a side yard. But I know there's definitions. I know there's things that we need to, and couldn't find that. I was looking hard for that.
Yeah,
419 is the definitions.
thank you.
5419?
Yeah, I was gonna say, did you do a word search?
No, but I can.
Yeah, do a word search for,
I just put lot shape and it came in 5419 definitions, side lot means, rear lot means,
Oops.
okay,
side lot line separate from lot line street. view.
Yeah, section 30, with 54 plot
50
plans.
Chapter 54, 19, section 19, or section 54, chapter.
Oh, 19 definitions.
Definitions.
Okay, these are definitions. Da, 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 da. And which bullet? 10? No.
it's gonna be,
14 committees, 7 votes, and specified town of committees. Oh, come on.
You do control F and search for like a keyword, it'll just pop up.
In
yellow.
in the community code?
Yeah, you can do control F and it'll find.
Oh,
And then if you- Like I have the word lot in there, so anytime the word
Front?
lot pops up.
yeah. Yeah, I
Oh,
don't
here
know
we
how
go.
this works. So front lot line means, in the case of an interior lot abutting upon one public or private street, a line separating such lot from such street right of way. So that would be the front
That
lot
would-
line
yeah.
at the road. That would be the northeast corner. In the case of a corner lot, the front lot line shall be the narrower of the two. In the case of a double, which you don't have.
You just gotta find the definition under, for their 7 corners.
Rear lot line means ordinarily that lot line which is opposite and most distant from the front lot line of the lot.
Which is opposite and most
In the
distant.
case of an irregular, triangular, or cone-shaped lot, a line 10 feet in length entirely within the lot, parallel to, this is why we're rewriting our zone. Just so we're clear on this, it's like a differential equation every time you have to read these things, okay? So a line 10 feet in length entirely within the lot, parallel to, and at the maximum distance from the front lot line of the lot shall be considered to be the rear lot line for the purposes of determining the depth
Well,
of the rear yard. In cases where none of these definitions are applicable, the property owner with township approval may designate the rear lot line, or the Board of Zoning Appeals shall designate the rear lot line.
and just based on that definition, the only line that's parallel to the road is the one that sits right behind the 2 other properties, not up against.
That's true.
If you look at the definition of parallel, I'll tell you right now, those are the only 2 that are gonna be closely to be parallel.
Which one?
Right here. This one.
It's actually, I would call it the front. But according to the definition with parallel in there,
No. So the rear, we're talking about the rear lot line.
right,
So this
The
would be
farthest
the rear lot.
distance.
Parallel to and at the maximum distance from the front lot line. Right, it's got to be where you can get at least 10 feet, where it's parallel to the front and at the maximum distance from the front lot line.
so that would literally would take us right here.
No,
Or
go
That's-
back to the DNR line.
Well, no, because if you're talking parallel, these aren't parallel. These
No, parallel to the front of the property. Front of the property.
Is right here.
Right. And parallel to that is the DNR,
Well,
which
according
is,
according to the definition of parallel lines, they're not parallel.
well, there's no parallel line here,
This is gonna be the closest to being parallel with the front.
but it's not the maximum.
So your interpretation, Jenny.
At
is
the
this.
maximum distance from the front lot line.
So you're saying maximum distance is to this point here?
Yeah.
Most parallel, so you're saying that that would be by definition determined to be a rear lot line.
For determining the depth of the rear yard. In cases where none of these definitions are applicable,
That's where I think we're at. I mean, if you really want to, that's where I'm
the
at.
property owner with township approval may designate the rear lot line, or the Board of Zoning Appeals shall designate the rear lot line.
So I don't have any problem with it at all. I
Because
think-
if I'm looking at this property, because of the way this is shaped, my initial thought was this would be the rear. Because the way the house is set, facing this way, that this becomes the rear house. But it doesn't fit the definition, but then
No.
again, I'm not sure I would be comfortable saying any of them fit
The
the
definition.
definition for this particular piece of property.
So then we can designate.
So we have a property that arguably has 5 side boundaries, right? So we can have a multitude of rears, fronts, and sides.
We can.
I mean, you got 7 lines. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. One of them is the front. So you got 6 others here that,
I could see that we have furthest south property being a rear, having 3 sides and a small front. I could see that.
I'd say that's exceptional and extraordinary conditions of the property.
Yeah.
That we said she was exceptional.
Hey, that's recorded for you now.
So I just want to make a note here. So we are in the section 5419.
Yep. And we're looking at the definitions of rear lot lines.
Yeah, under lot lines. Subsection 2.
It's coming
Now,
down.
if we keep talking, we'll get through the rainstorm and.
I got dinner waiting though, you know?
All right. So we're in, on the definition sections 5419, under lot line subsection 2, in which the ordinance grants the Board of Zoning Appeals the authority to designate a rear lot line. Because we have numerous sites, we're going to determine that the southernmost property line is the rear. We have 1 rear, 1 front, and 3 multiple sides, actually. We will call it multiple sides.
Yep.
Multiple sides. All right. In which case, we would find that the proposed 20 by 24 barn is actually in a side, is adjacent to 2 sides.
2 sides, yep.
And by the ordinance for REF, he would not require a variance.
Well, he would,
No,
he
it
would,
still would because it's.
because you gotta move it over to get to
Oh,
19
yeah,
feet.
yeah, yeah,
You gotta get 19 feet off of that property line
Yep.
so that you can do it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So if it's placed, let's say 20 feet,
20 feet.
20 feet from the property line adjoining the DNR property,
Right.
20 feet off of that.
Which is 4 feet
Yeah.
more,
Yep.
or a little over 4 feet more than what you have placed right now.
Yeah,
I can do that.
because if
So
we,
the DNR property, you're classifying that as the rear yard?
No.
It's a side,
Side
side.
Side yard.
side yard. The rear is going to be the very southern.
Yeah, see, I have more of the surveys if anybody doesn't have.
The southern.
I'm an electronic guy. I gotta have that.
Yeah, there you go.
So you don't do paper.
If you moved it 4 feet up,
Yeah.
would you not have to remove any of the trees?
No, there's,
Yeah, there's still. a
There's still
couple
some
of-
trees there, I think.
yeah, I gotta remove, I don't think I have to remove more. There's
Okay.
One that might, maybe I might have to remove.
Okay, I just wondered, because they're pretty big trees right there.
Yeah,
You might even get away by moving it that 4 feet, the ones that you had that were right up against
Yeah, the back, yeah.
you know, the wooded area.
yeah.
Might be, okay. I didn't look to see how tall they were to see.
So 80 feet, and that's where the storm's going to come out of the west, pushing it towards the barn, or the metal roof. As I
So
told
what-
the guy,
How do you wanna?
if you cut a tree, I'll just have a
I
view.
want to look at the schedule again for, I just had
Here,
it.
sure. I can pull it up here.
I'll still see.
Oh, should have had it right here. Schedule regulation. Boom.
It's, give me the number.
506, 54506.
All right, so the total of two sides is 80 feet. Because I'm looking at the at least one is 40, which you'd have, right? If we
Yep.
consider, see, I don't see the 15. I want the 20, but I don't see that 15 doesn't do it. I'm just looking at the requirements.
Right.
So if we do, well, we do this, right?
Isn't
Two
it-
sides have to be, because we're saying this is a side.
Yeah, this is a side here. I'm just going off of the 61 feet from the corner. The closest corner to that side is 61 feet, right?
Yeah.
And then you have, then this barn here, the closest corner is 15.7. So if you move that barn 4 feet to the east, you would have, you would have 20 feet there and 61, which gives you 81, which complies with the side yard setbacks of 80 feet. And you give yourself a 1 foot. Yeah. So I think that's kind of the way I'm looking at it, because you would have, yeah, you could go all the way across, but I'm looking at it, all the structures, your house structure, your barn structure and everything. I think that's the way that I always interpret the ordinance.
Yeah, yeah.
So don't go out.
We got generator, will pick right up.
Will it? Okay. So,
All right. So, all right, now, with that, so to summarize where we're at, so if he moves the barn
Well,
20 feet to the east.
4 feet.
20 feet off the line.
Yeah.
So it's
a
20 feet
total of
off the-
20 yeah,
20 feet.
total of 20 feet
Yeah.
off. That by us making a determination that the property line adjacent to the DNR is a side yard,
He doesn't need a
he
variance.
does not need a variance.
We just have to make
Right.
my understanding that we would just have to make the motion and approve that southern line is going to be. the
That's what
rear.
we're determining
Yeah.
based on this odd shaped lot.
Yep. So that we wouldn't have to approve the variance because there'd no longer be the need for the variance. You move it that 4.3 feet, you're within the ordinance of the total 80 feet side yard.
Right?
So what would our motion be then?
I will.
First
make
we'd have,
And then we'll make the motion.
when we're ready, we'll first have to close the public hearing.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
gotta close that public hearing.
And then we can make the motion about
Okay,
the rear. and-
got it.
Got it.
All right,
I'm still living, Robert.
And you're agreeable with that?
Yes.
Okay.
and any other comments, questions?
I'll make the motion
Thank
to
you.
close the public hearing portion of the meeting.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are now out of the public hearing, back into our regular meeting, ready to make a motion on the matter regarding the request for a variance. I'll make the motion slowly, so Danielle. After reviewing the definitions of lot lines in section 54-19 of the ordinance, the BZA has made a determination of front, side, and rear lot lines for the parcel in question. New sentence. It's our determination that the lot line adjacent with the DNR is a side yard. And therefore, if the applicant locates the proposed barn 20 feet from that property line, he will be in accordance with the ordinance. He will be in compliance, that's the word I want,
Compliance.
in compliance with the ordinance.
Maybe subsection 2 that grants us the authority to do that.
What is it?
Subsection 2 of the 5419 allows us to do that
Under lot lines, yeah.
under lot lines.
You'll be in compliance with the ordinance and does not require a variance.
I'll second that motion.
Judy seconds.
Yeah.
Before we take a vote. I've just never done this before, where we say you don't need a variance.
Should there be something in the motion regarding the
Right.
exceptional odd shaped lot? that
Oh,
we're
yeah.
Talking about,
Yeah, yeah.
because I think that's our
Basically.
Reason.
disposition
Yeah.
on it.
Yeah, so
We're
the,
reviewing the lot in its odd shapes that we want to look at.
highly irregular, irregular, highly
Irregular.
irregular.
I know, I've never seen a lot lines like
No, I
that.
haven't either.
And you've been doing this a lot longer than I have. So
Yeah.
if you've never seen it,
I've
then
never- It's not that bad.
And we have agreement from the applicants to put the structure 20 feet from the property line.
The side yard.
There's an agreement from the applicants. So our,
20 feet, you said?
yes,
Well, no, they only have to move it forward.
Yeah.
but
No, no,
a total of
it's-
20 feet, so
For a
it's,
total.
it's,
What it's
Yeah.
gonna be.
20 feet from the
line.
property.
For a total.
Yeah. I want it 20 feet from the property line. So I'm gonna pause for a minute before, we have a second on that motion. But I need to think for a minute here because we are not approving or denying a variance here. We are making a determination of a definition that's applicable to this property. And in that, based on his agreement to where to place the barn, he doesn't need a variance.
So do we need a motion?
Well, we do, but I'm kind of thinking this one, I'm thinking as I speak, which is difficult to do. I think what,
Forget it, I wouldn't be able to do it.
I think what our motion, everything we've said is correct, but I think our motion has to be that we are accepting the definition.
So make 2 motions.
Well, there's no one approval or denial of a variance, because if we approve the definition as it applies to his property, he agrees to build within 20 feet of that property, side yard property line, we don't need a variance. So I think what our motion is to say, we concur with the definition of side, rear, and front yard lot lines applicable to this property as described. And with the placement of the structure 20 feet from the property line adjacent to the DNR.
Okay.
Yeah. We no longer.
A variance is no longer
A
required.
variance is no longer required. And so we're going to agree that we've reviewed the ordinance, the definition, we've made our determination, and with that, and the new location of the pole barn no variance is required.
Okay.
All right, so we'll make sure we get that, but we're all in agreement.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So with that, long, lengthy,
That's okay. I'll get it in a nice, pretty order.
thank you. So, roll call
You
vote,
can't
please.
return. It's in a long.
Mike Donlin,
Yes, sorry.
Judy Schultz,
Yes.
Chris Johnson,
Yes.
Gina Musarelli. Yes. Jennifer Sevigny.
Yes. So, did you understand? 20 feet from the property line, you're good to go.
Front property line, a back property line, and 5 side property.
Exactly.
Yes.
You got it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And actually, I will tell you that's going to be important on this property 20 years from now, when somebody wants to do something, we've made a determination of what our side yards, front yard, and
Yes.
rear.
I'll
rear
send it
lot.
all to the actual property except in these names, so it's all in there for future.
Yes, thank you.
Cool.
All right. Was there any community members on the call?
Nope.
Nope. Okay, none in the audience, so we have no public comments. Any new business? Any
No.
additional comments before we adjourn?
No?
Okay, with that, I'll take a motion.
So moved.
Somewhere.
All right, yeah, I had more of them. You can have this. I'll second this one.
All right.
What's
Yeah.
first and then Chris?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, meeting is adjourned. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.